Every few months, something strange happens in India. The price of your LPG cylinder suddenly increases. This time, it increased by around 60 rupees in a single move. But here's the interesting part. India does not produce most of the LPG it uses. In fact, more than 60% of India's LPG is imported from other countries, which means the price of the gas used in your kitchen is actually controlled by global economics, geopolitics, and energy markets. So the real question is, why did LPG prices suddenly increase right now? And more importantly, why might they continue rising in the future? To understand this, we need to follow the journey of LPG, from the oil fields of the Middle East, all the way to your kitchen stove. Most people think LPG is simply cooking gas, but in reality, LPG stands for liquefied petroleum gas. It is a mixture of gases like propane and butane, which are byproducts of crude oil refining and natural gas processing. Normally, these gases exist in a gaseous state, but when compressed under pressure, they turn into liquid. This allows LPG to be stored inside metal cylinders and transported across long distances, which is why LPG became the most convenient cooking fuel in many developing countries. In India alone, more than 300 million households rely on LPG for daily cooking. But there is one major problem. India does not produce enough LPG domestically, and that creates a massive dependency. India is one of the largest consumers of LPG in the world. But when it comes to production, India produces less than half of what it needs. So the remaining LPG has to be imported from countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait. These countries are part of the global energy supply chain. Every month, India buys huge quantities of LPG from these suppliers. The price of this LPG is usually linked to something called the Saudi Contract Price, or CP. This price is decided based on international crude oil prices and global LPG demand. So when global energy prices rise, India ends up paying more for LPG imports, and eventually, consumers feel that impact through higher cylinder prices. But recently, something unusual started happening in the global energy market. The world's energy system is extremely fragile. A single conflict in one region can disrupt fuel prices across the entire planet. And right now, tensions in the Middle East are once again affecting global energy supply. The Middle East controls a huge portion of the world's oil and gas production. If supply from this region becomes unstable, global energy markets immediately react. Traders expect future shortages. Prices start increasing, and importing countries like India must pay higher prices. But geopolitics isn't the only factor. Another major reason behind rising LPG prices is global demand. Over the past decade, LPG has become increasingly popular across the world. Many developing countries are shifting away from firewood coal kerosene. Instead, governments are encouraging households to switch to LPG for cleaner cooking fuel. Even in India, the Ujjwala Yojana scheme distributed millions of LPG connections to rural households. This dramatically increased LPG demand across the country. While this improved living standards, it also increased India's dependence on imported LPG. So when global prices increase, the cost impact becomes much larger. But there is another hidden factor behind LPG price changes: government subsidies. For many years, LPG cylinders in India were heavily subsidized. The government paid a large portion of the price so that households could afford cooking gas. But over time, these subsidies have gradually been reduced. Instead of directly controlling prices, The government now allows LPG prices to adjust more closely with international markets. This means when global prices increase, consumers feel the increase more directly, and that is exactly what we are seeing today. But there is one final factor that most people completely ignore. Almost all global energy trade happens in US dollars, so when India imports LPG, it has to pay in dollars. But if the Indian rupee weakens against the dollar, imports become more expensive, even if global LPG prices stay the same. A weaker rupee can increase the cost of importing fuel, which again eventually increases the price of LPG cylinders in India. So when you combine all these factors together, global energy tensions, rising demand, reduced subsidies, currency fluctuations, you get a perfect storm for rising LPG prices. India's demand for LPG is expected to continue increasing. More households are shifting toward LPG as their primary cooking fuel. But unless India dramatically increases domestic production, the country will remain dependent on global energy markets, and that means LPG prices will always be vulnerable to global conflicts, oil price fluctuations, currency movements. In other words, the price of the gas in your kitchen is actually connected to the global energy system. So the next time LPG prices suddenly increase, it might not be because of a local decision. It might actually be because of something happening thousands of kilometers away. Because in today's global economy, even the flame on your stove is connected to the world's energy markets.